Hi, I'm Gordon from Camera Labs, and this is my quick first looks review of the Laowa 200mm f2.AF, a large aperture telephoto prime lens designed for full frame systems and available in Sony E, Nikon Z and Canon EF mounts. Yes, a new lens for the older Canon DSLR mount, which means this version not only works as a native lens on existing Canon DSLRs, but can also be adapted to RF mirrorless cameras to work with Canon's latest bodies, or indeed be adapted to almost any system. It's an interesting workaround while third parties remain unable to make native full-frame RF lenses with autofocus. Now, a new high-end EF lens is newsworthy in itself, but so is Laowa's pricing. Canon and Nikon's original 200mm f2 DSLR lenses sold for over 4 or 5 grand when they were first released many years ago, and still command high prices on the used markets. In comparison, Sigma's recent 200mm f2, launched only a couple of months earlier, already look like great value at around $3,300 or £3,000. But now Laowa is really putting the cat among the pigeons by pitching their new 200mm f2 lens at less than 2/3 the price of the Sigma, just $2,000 or pounds for the Sony or Nikon models, or $1,800 or pounds for the Canon EF version. That's seriously affordable for such an exotic lens, and again great news for Canon mirrorless owners who've so far been neglected on new full-frame third-party lenses with autofocus. Now, I'm in the process of fully testing the new Laowa lens in situations to compare with the results that I've already got for the Sigma 200 f2 for an in-depth review that's coming soon, but for now I wanted to share some initial results with you. I tested the EF version adapted to an EOS R6 II using Canon's own EF to EOS-R adapter, although I believe that Laowa will also offer a third-party EOS-R adapter that's optimised for the lens. Laowa also mentioned that the lens could be adapted to the larger Fujifilm GFX format with autofocus, although to be honest I'd also be interested in adapting it to X mount, since Fujifilm's own 200mm f2 costs 3 times the price. A huge difference even if it does come with a 1.4 times teleconverter. Measuring 118mm in diameter and 148mm long for the EF versions, it's an understandably chunky lens, but actually shorter than rival versions. Sigma's 200 f2 is just over 200mm long. Obviously, you're going to extend the length of the Laowa a little once you've added an adapter for EOS-R bodies, or indeed any other system, at which point it's going to roughly match the length of the Sony E and Nikon Z versions, albeit still about 25mm shorter than the Sigma. So I'd guess that these mirrorless versions essentially start with the EF design and just extend the barrel backwards like an adapter would, albeit with electronics optimised for that mount. That said, Laowa's not wasted the extra length on those versions and allows those models to accommodate 43mm rear filters as an alternative to that big 105mm filter on the front. Sadly, the EF version doesn't have room for rear-mounted filters, but Canon mirrorless owners can enjoy this functionality if they use the EOS-R adapter with a slot-in filter option. The Laowa lens is also lighter than most at just over 1.5 kilos versus 1.8 kilograms for the Sigma, or over 2.5 kilograms for those older DSLR models, although again remember to factor in the weight of an adapter if you're going to be using one. The Laowa lens includes a built-in tripod collar with notches to feed back at 90-degree intervals and a foot with an Arca Swiss dovetail that can be removed to save some weight. There's a focus limiter switch, a heavily damped manual focusing ring, and 5 buttons which all share the same customizable function. A large cylindrical hood is also supplied. Laowa describes the lens as being dust and moisture resistant, and this includes a rubber grommet at the mount. One feature missing from the Laowa lens though is optical image stabilization, so if you want to iron out any wobbles on photos you're going to need IBIS, or for video some kind of digital stabilization instead. As for teleconverters, it doesn't currently work with any officially, but Laowa tells me they're hoping to support them in the future. Now this isn't guaranteed though, so don't count on it. To be fair, Sigma's 200 f2 doesn't work with teleconverters either, but since I believe the Laowa is based on a DSLR optical design, I've got higher hopes for it in the future. Ahead of my full review, now let's have a quick look at some results, starting with my distant landscape scene, shot here using the R6 II and the lens wide open at f2. Taking a closer look in the middle reveals nice sharp details right out of the gate. Maybe not quite as crisp as I found from the Sigma in an earlier test, albeit using a different system, but still looking very good. Meanwhile, heading into the corners shows that sharpness mostly maintained, so it's already looking very promising, wide open. Next for a portrait test at f2 of course, where you can enjoy very shallow depth of field effects with minimal distractions in the background. It's a very different look to what you can achieve with shorter telephotos, albeit necessitating a more distant shooting position. Taking a closer look at the details shows the lens to be very sharp on those focused areas, but with nice and smooth rendering in front and behind. Those scaffolding poles to my side could have become distractingly busy on lesser lenses, but the fall off here looks attractive. Next for bokeh blobs at the minimum focusing distance of 1.5 meters, closer than the Sigma or those older DSLR lenses. Here you can see the blobs are looking well behaved with minimal outlining or textures within. So far so good, but can it be used for action, especially adapted to a mirrorless Canon body? Here's a selection of shots of Steven Seagal and friends, taken with the full AF area and animal selected as the subject type on the R6 II. The lens was wide open here at f2, and as the birds get closer you can enjoy some nice separation from the background. There are a handful of misses in these initial burst tests, but plenty of sharply focused images to choose from, so it's looking like a promising option for relatively close range sports or wildlife. It can also work well for video, filming more relaxed subjects, again here with animal subject detection. And while the lens doesn't include optical image stabilisation, you can see an example of how the R6 II's IBIS alone is keeping the view reasonably steady for handheld video. I'm going to wrap up now while showing a few more samples, all wide open at f2. So far, the Laowa 200mm f2 is looking like a great option to enjoy the exotic nature of an unusually bright aperture telephoto prime without breaking the bank. Sure, it's not loose change by any means, but it is way more affordable than anything similar that came before it. Of course, most people are going to prefer the flexibility of a 70-200 and be happy to trade, say, a stop of aperture for the chance to zoom, but if you almost always find yourself at the long end of this range, a 200mm f2 prime will give you an extra stop of aperture and shallower depth of field effects that give it an edge for dramatic portraits. I'm also hoping it's going to perform well for astrophotography, and, weather permitting, I'll include some results in my full review. This will also include some comparisons against the Sigma 200 f2, as well as more tests and samples from the Laowa. So make sure you're subscribed with notifications so that you don't miss this or indeed any of my other in-depth lens reviews. Thanks for watching, let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.